Listalla on seuraavana komission varapuheenjohtajan, unionin ulkoasioiden ja turvallisuuspolitiikan korkean edustajan julkilausuma Saudi-Arabian ja Iranian tilanteesta. Olkaa hyvä.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me say before I get into the details of this topic, a few words on what happened in Vienna on Saturday, where we showed that exactly 6 months after having reached an agreement with Iran on their nuclear program, Iran fulfilled its commitments we agreed on. The IA verified this compliance, and the international community through the E3+3 joint commission that I continue to coordinate, and I will continue to coordinate, and my successor after me for the whole duration of the agreement, that this has been done, and so the deal was implemented. And let me remind all of us that 6 months ago there were many people around not only Europe but the region and the world that were expressing strong skepticism on the fact that we would ever get to the implementation day, because they were investing on the possibility, or betting on the possibility, that Iran would have not followed up the agreement with concrete deeds. And let me say that most of all, obviously, it's a nuclear negotiation, it's a nuclear agreement, and this is the core of our satisfaction, the fact that we have prevented a major risk of nuclear proliferation to happen, and maybe even the possibility of a conflict in the region. This is the first reason for satisfaction, but also let me say that there is another element of satisfaction that is linked to the fact that we have shown that multilateralism and diplomacy can work, refer to the previous debate, and not only that it can work in terms of reaching an agreement, but it can also deliver in terms of implementing it. So in these difficult times, I think this is also a good reason for hope. And let me also say, by the way, that I move to the real issue of our debate, but I think it is quite connected. Let me also say that there are two other elements for hope. One is the way that now opens up for relations of Iran with the rest of the world, starting from the Europeans, and for us Europeans to engage in Iran in different ways and in different sectors. And finally, last but not least, maybe the most important, is that this agreement could open the way to a different kind of relation in the region. And here we come to the issue of tonight. Because as we managed to build over a negotiation that lasted for 13 years, so with difficulties and difficult moments and ups and downs and a lot of, as I said, skepticism, as we managed to come to that historic result against all odds, one could say, we, I believe, have to now invest on the possibility of having a different kind of cooperation in the region. We are not naive. We know very well that this will not be easy, that this will not happen overnight, for sure, that we will face obstacles and setbacks. The willingness of Iran to further cooperate on regional matters will have to be tested, but already the fact that it is stated is a step forward compared to the past, but it will need to be tested as it needed to be tested their will to implement the agreement they signed in July. But think back just 1 year ago, again. Many believed we would never manage to agree on a strong deal with Iran, a verifiable and implementable deal, and we proved them wrong. And if we keep working hard and together, united as Europeans and with the rest of the international community, I am sure we can keep surprising the skeptics somehow. Dialogue among all regional powers, starting with Saudi Arabia and Iran, we believe, I believe united in this, is the only way out of the current turmoil in the Middle East. In the past few years, a struggle for regional hegemony has mixed with revamped ethnic and confessional tensions. Terrorist groups as Daesh are fostering sectarianism to throw the region even more into chaos and bolster their own power. International disputes between Saudi Arabia and Iran can easily play into the narrative of a war of religion between Sunni and Shia Muslims, and we know this very well. The risks of this are huge. New frictions can block the difficult path towards peace in Syria, that we just discussed, but also in Yemen, that we didn't discuss this time, but I think we discuss tomorrow. They can destabilize Iraq, Lebanon, the two countries in the region that are more exposed to sectarian tensions. They can destabilize entire Muslim communities worldwide, from Asia to Africa, in the Horn and in the Sahel. A bilateral tension can, in this way, inflame, potentially, the region even more, prevent some political processes to either start or bring results, and potentially they can inflame the war. This is why we are trying to contain and de-escalate these tensions in strict coordination among ourselves as Europeans, with all the member states, passing the same kind of message all together, and with our international partners, from the United States to, let me mention just one, the Foreign Minister of Indonesia that I had on the phone just before her trip to Tehran and Saudi Arabia a few days ago to try and facilitate the containment and the de-escalation of the conflict. And this shows how much this issue is felt as an important one in at least 3 continents, if not 4, because potentially this could inflame communities around the world. We, as you might know, reacted immediately on January the 2nd to the execution by the Saudi authorities of the Shia cleric Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr and 46 other individuals, most of whom had been convicted on terrorism charges in relation to their links to Al-Qaeda. As I expressed in my statement that I issued on the same day, that penalty can in no way be a sustainable or efficient response to crime or terrorism. The EU opposes capital punishment under any circumstances, and we shall continue to consistently advocate for the universal abolition of death penalty. Of course, this also refers to Iran, whose human rights record is worrying, and these are messages that I conveyed not only to the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, but also to the Foreign Minister of Iran that I contacted in those days. The specific case of Sheikh Nimr al-Nimr raises very serious concerns, also regarding freedom of expression and respect of basic civil and political rights. This should be safeguarded in all cases, also, let me stress this, in the framework of the fight against terrorism. We have taken an immediate position also on the reactions in Iran, because nothing can justify an attack on embassies or consulates, as it was the case with the Saudi embassy in Tehran and the consulate in Mashhad. In my contacts with both the Iranian and the Saudi foreign ministers in those days and after that, I stressed the need for Iran to abide by its international obligations, and this also means to ensure the protection of diplomatic premises in all circumstances. In my phone call with both sides, the main message, and in the contacts we had afterwards, because we were meeting also, obviously, as you've seen with Mr. Zarif over the weekend, the main messages I passed was, on one side, try to manage these bilateral tensions without inflaming the risk of spillovers, especially in the region, and trying to preserve our efforts for peace in Syria and Yemen, and try to avoid destabilization, further destabilization in the area, especially with concerns to Iraq and Lebanon. And I found reassurances on both sides on the need to find a way of preserving these processes. You know, we just discussed the Syria process that needs support from all the regional players in order to start and to have some chances of succeeding. For the same reason, I also discussed in the very first days of the year the situation and the risks of this situation to degenerate with the UN Special Envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, to try and find commonly ways of protecting the process, with the Secretary General of the Arab League, with ministers of many Arab and African countries, and as I said, also with some Asian ministers. We are coordinating messages and actions, not only with our partners, but first and foremost among Europeans, as we've done also yesterday at the Foreign Affairs Council, where we discussed and agreed on common lines also on this. Finding a negotiated solution to the current conflicts in the Middle East is in everybody's interest, especially in the region. Protracted war can only benefit terrorists of all kinds, and it can only let instability spread further, well beyond the borders of the Middle East, and we know that very well in Europe. This is not a zero-sum game, and this is the message, the other strong message we're passing to our Iranian and Saudi friends. If the wars in Syria and in Yemen and the tensions in the region do not stop, everybody will lose. There is not one single place in the region that can benefit from tensions to raise. The only alternative to a win-win solution, where everybody sees its interests recognised, is chaos and further chaos. It took us months to gather all regional powers around the same table to discuss peace in Syria, as we discussed. The same goes for Libya, where today we had encouraging news, also given the fact that we managed to unite the regional and international actors in a similar process than the one we put together for Syria. And we cannot afford to waste any of these positive trends, and we cannot afford to expose them to tensions that need to stay contained and, if possible, at a bilateral level. The European Union will keep doing all that we can to promote dialogue, fight sectarianism, and this is also because we have learned our own EU lesson. I was saying this during the previous point of discussion, the previous point of discussion on Colombia. This is the EU lesson. It's only regional cooperation that brings peace and prosperity, and we have experienced this for 60 years now. Only through this kind of regional understanding and cooperation and partnership we've managed to overcome centuries of war and conflict and experience peace in our region. So this is our way. We believe it's regional cooperation and never confrontation or competition that can be beneficial for all. And this is true even more for an area of the world like the Middle East. Thank you.
And now to the speaking list, and the first one will be Mr. Preda.
Infiniment, Madame